What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be breaking down all of the main card fights from UFC 265, and I really hope that you're going to enjoy this video because the main card's absolutely phenomenal for UFC 265. There's some amazing stylistic matchups for us to take a deep dive into, and I really hope that you're going to be able to use the information in this video to help you with your bets this weekend. I want to start off by saying a massive thank you to everyone that reached out to me this week, everyone that left me messages of support. You've been super kind, and you got no idea how much of a lift that's given me during what has been honestly one of the toughest weeks of my life. Honestly, like your kindness, your positivity is giving me the energy to keep going this week and is really giving me a lift when I needed it. So thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Next week, once the UFC is out the way for this weekend, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to respond to every single one of you individually because man, you have no idea. You have no idea how much I appreciate you guys. Yeah, you have no idea how much I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. I'm really sorry that this video was late. It was not my intention to put this video out this late at all. This week I was well ahead of schedule. We started researching UFC 265 last week, so I was planning on being able to drop this YouTube video by like Wednesday, but I've had to deal with so much, unpredictable bullshit this week that has been a total waste of my time, but just stuff that I just couldn't put off. It had to be dealt with this week, you know what I mean? So it's been a tough week, man, but you guys mean the world to me, and like it's that thing where sometimes you don't really appreciate how lucky you are until something really bad happens, man. Like, I took you guys for granted, and I'm never going to take you guys for granted ever again. I fucking appreciate you to death, and I'm going to make sure that these YouTube videos are just the absolute best of the best they can be, to try and repay you guys. Now, at the moment, there's a copyright strike on my YouTube channel. It's a false one. It should get removed pretty soon. That does prevent me from live streaming at the moment. It might also result in my channel being temporarily taken down, but that won't stop me. Nothing's going to stop me. If you do see my channel's been taken down, just know I'll be dropping a video that week whatever happens. All you'll have to do is go to the YouTube search engine, type in the name of the card you want and Diary of a Pro Gambler. I'll just set up another channel. I'm not going anywhere, boys. At the end of the day, it's very important to me to give back. You know what I'm saying? So I know, full on after this week, you guys have fully 100% got my back. So I'm just going to be bringing you the fucking best YouTube videos ever. I'm not saying it from the perspective like I'm the best YouTuber ever. I don't mean it like that. I mean, I'm going to bring you the best YouTube videos I can possibly bring you. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to make them as best as they could be, as best as I can make them, sort of thing. You know what I mean? I'm not talking like all that. I'm going to try and make them really good. All right, boys? That's all I'm saying. So let's jump right into it because this card is amazing, and I do think it's a very good card for betting, and I think every single one of the fights on this main card are extremely interesting, and I really want to go deep on these fights for you, and I'm really hoping that that's going to help you with your bets this weekend, and I really hope you're going to be able to make some money from kind of the things we're going to discuss. I think every single one of these fights is really interesting. So let's kick things off with the first fight on the main card, an absolute banger between Casey Kenny and Yadong Song. So let's talk about the fight between Casey Kenny and Yadong Song. So one of the reasons why I love this card so much is because of how many fights are in that even money odds range. You look at the four fighters, 4 of the 5 fighters on this main card, they're all in that even money odds range, all floating around that 1.80, 1.91 territory, which is, minus 110, which means, 4 of the 5 fights on this card are in that implied probability range of 50%, where the current odds suggest that both guys have roughly got a 50% chance of winning, which makes main cards like this and events like this so cool for betting, because if you can just lean 60-40 one way or the other, you could often find a strong position to put your cash. So it's definitely worth us going very deep on this card. So yeah, let's talk about this fight between Casey Kenny and Yadong Song. So, Casey Kenny was one of the first names that jumped out at me as a potential bet this week. And as we can see, he is the slight favourite. So if we pop his odds into the implied probability calculator, we can see that it gives us 1.83, which is minus 120 for an implied probability of 55%. If we take a look at the odds on Song Yadong, he's currently around about an average of 2.0, which is plus 100 for an implied probability of 50%. Now, this is a really tricky fight to call because Yadong Song, it appears to me to be one of these guys that is improving at a ridiculously fast rate. So even though Song has been around for a while now, he is only 23 years old, which means, he is going to be at that stage in the career where, he's like a sponge. He's absorbing new knowledge, new techniques all the time. And, when you look at Song Yadong, and the base he's working from, he's very fast, he's very athletic, he's tough, he's got a great chin. And so, when you start to throw technique and skills at him, he if he's a fast learner, he can get a lot better very, very quickly. And I think to some extent we've seen this because if you look at Yadong Song's performance against Marlon Vera, even though he won the fight, it wasn't great. Like, there were long periods of inactivity. Defensively, he didn't look good. His takedown offense and ground game really let him down. Whereas in his last fight against Kyler Phillips, he looked pretty good, which is such a contradiction because obviously he beat Vera. I know a lot of people disagree with the decision, but he did beat Vera, but he didn't look good. But then he lost to Phillips, and he did look good. So it's kind of like a bit of a contradiction there, where he looked better in the fight that he actually lost. And this presents us with our first problem because I think if Yadong Song shows up and performs like he did against Kyler Phillips, I actually see this matchup against Casey Kenny being razor close. But if he shows up and performs like he did against Marlon Vera, I think Casey Kenny beats the absolute brakes off him and dominates. So we're in a really tricky position here because I believe, Song Yadong improved by an order of magnitude in between the Marlon Vera and the Kyler Phillips fight. So are we going to see, another exponential improvement from him, this weekend against Casey Kenny? Now, there was just under a year gap in between the Vera and Phillips fight, which would explain some of some of the major improvements the Song made. We're only 5 months since his fight against Kyler Phillips, but Song could either be a guy that's very inconsistent, or he could be a fighter that is improving rapidly. And because of his age, with him only being 23 years old, I would guess that he's a guy that is improving super fast. So we've got to be a little bit careful with this one because we'll never really know, what we're going to get from Song, on a fight night until we either establish that he is either inconsistent or, his improvements start to plateau. So if we look at how these guys match up from a stylistic point of view, Casey Kenny's a really interesting fighter because he started off as a grappler, but he's actually developed now into being a really good striker. And now I actually feel like Casey Kenny's striking is better than his grappling. Problem I've got with Casey Kenny is that he's not the most physically imposing grappler. Like, he's a very good offensive wrestler. He's got decent chain wrestling, but he's not that strong and physically imposing. So when he gets guys down, he tends to struggle to hold them down. Now, this was one of the big improvements that I saw from Song in between the Phillips and Vera fight. When Marlon Vera would take Song Yadong down, Song would kind of allow Vera to flatten him out on his back, and Song generally looked very, very weak on his back against Vera. When Kyler Phillips took him down, Song immediately looked to create scrambles off his back and quickly work his way back up to his feet, which is significant because, Kenny is a very strong wrestler who will probably be able to get Song down, but will he be able to hold him down? I'm not so sure. I'm not sure he has the physicality and athleticism to control Song Yadong, because like I say, Song Yadong is just a very strong, athletic, powerful guy. In terms of how these guys match up when it comes to striking, they've both got really, really different styles. So Song Yadong likes to put a lot of pressure on his opponents, walk them down, bait them into getting into these big reckless exchanges and loading up on big power shots and betting on his chin against theirs. Doesn't really throw many kicks, got very much of a boxing style, and the majority of his shots are like big winging power shots, big winging hooks. Casey Kenny is, also likes to come forward and pressure his opponents, but he's much more technical than Song, much better footwork. He's a lot better defensively than Song. The one area where you can really give Kenny a big advantage here is striking defense. Kenny does a really good job of reading his opponents and staying behind the high boxing guard to block and deflect, power strikes that his opponents throw at him. But a very different style of striking. Kenny's a decent boxer, he really is, but his best weapons are his kicks. He's got beautiful leg kicks, amazing body kicks, and I think they're really going to help him, against Song. Again, when I talk about Song, when I break this fight down, it's a difficult one because he looked completely different against Kyler Phillips than how he looked against Marlon Vera. If you go and watch the fight against Marlon Vera, he looked very flat-footed, struggled to read Vera, and so if Song shows up and performs like he did against Vera, he's going to be wide open to the heavy leg kicks of Casey Kenny. But Song was much lighter on his feet, had much better footwork, much better movement against Kyler Phillips, was much more elusive. And so if Song shows up and fights like that, you are only as good as your last fight. The best indicator of what to expect this weekend is probably Song Yadong's last fight. I'd be a little bit more worried for Kenny, like I say, if the version of Song the Foot Phillips shows up. So Kenny is much better defensively, there's no doubt about it. And I think he can do big damage with his leg kicks and body kicks. But Song Yadong just has that physically imposing style of striking where it may negate a lot of the volume that Kenny's going to put together. Kenny's very much a volume striker that likes to chip away at his opponents. He does big damage, but it's not big damage with like one big kill shot. It's like accumulated damage. Whereas Song Yadong is a guy that can come forward, and land big power shots and kind of use his physicality to overwhelm his opponents. And I do feel Kenny really lacks physicality to his overall style. His technique is brilliant. Brilliant technical grappler. Brilliant technical striker. But not the strongest dude, whereas Song Yadong's very athletic and he's got strength in an abundance. So that is what makes this one interesting. Will Song Yadong be able to negate the superior technique and the volume of Kenny with just sheer raw athleticism, aggressiveness and power? He might be able to, because we know that this event is taking place in Texas. Texas is one of the worst athletic commissions, in the United States. They have some of the worst judges in the world. I think this is one of those fights where we could end up, Monday morning debating who won the fight. Did Kenny win it based on volume, or did Song Yadong win it based on, big damaging shots and big moments? The one thing that I don't like about Kenny is that he does drift in and out of fights. So when he first came into the UFC, his gas tank was a little bit questionable, but then it improved a lot, and since then Kenny's cardio's looked really good. But the problem with Kenny is, in order to fight at a high pace over 3 rounds, he needs to control his output. And so Kenny does have long periods in fights where he doesn't do a lot. He's quite passive, he's quite tentative, he doesn't really throw very much. And in those moments, it gives his opponents, opportunities to really put stamp on rounds and put points in the bank. And then Kenny relies on his ability to outscore them in, other moments in the fight, which are going to ultimately lead to him winning a decision. But it's a risky tactic for Kenny, particularly with judges like we're going to have in Texas, which are not going to be very good. Kenny is very smart with it, though. He does have good fight IQ. He knows when to go. He knows when to take time off. He knows how important it is to finish rounds strong. But his inactivity does bother me a bit because Song Yadong is very aggressive. What I would say about these two is that they have both had their issues with cardio in the past, but their very most recent fights does show that their cardio is getting a lot better. Song Yadong has slowed down, against Cody Stamann and Marlon Vera, but that fight against Kyler Phillips was contested at a crazy pace, And I actually think Song's gas tank held up better than Phillips's in the end. Casey Kenny's exactly the same. He's had issues with his gas tank earlier in his career, but since the Haley Alateng fight, very, very good. But I still have to totally trust these two boys because they do become less effective as the fight wears on. So, in terms of this fight, for me personally, I would lean Kenny. I don't feel great about betting him, but I lean Kenny just because for me, he's got more weapons that he can use to win. We absolutely know he's the better grappler. I don't know if he's going to be able to use his grappling against Song, but I do know he's the better grappler, and I do know that he doesn't have to worry about anything the Song could do to him on the ground. There's no way Song's taking this guy down and having any success on the ground. Kenny is too good. I also lean towards Kenny here because he's just much better defensively. You know, Song Yadong's reckless, easy to hit. He does get dinged a lot. He's got one hell of a chin, but he's definitely there to be hit, and Kenny is dangerous. I also like how Kenny's likely to be able to use his leg kicks and body kicks to inflict major damage on Song and slow him down. And I would also say that Kenny's the better boxer, but because he doesn't have as much power in his hands, even though he's faster, crisper, more technical, has more volume, I do think Song can negate that with his, his big power. So do definitely lean Kenny here. I just think that he might get like overpowered. The power of Song might be too much for him. Not in terms of him getting knocked out, but just Song being able to kind of walk him down, walk through his shots, quickly scramble back up to his feet if he does get taken down. That's why I'm worried about Kenny here. And the problem is when you've got a guy like Song that's exciting, that's flashy, big power in his hands, every time he lands something big, you get a big reaction from the crowd. We know the Texas judges are terrible. This one is a dangerous one. I lean Kenny, but not that confident on it. Okay, so hopefully you found that useful. So the last fight, I didn't feel that confident either way. We kind of lean towards Kenny. I do feel very confident one way on this fight, though. I do think that there is an interesting bet to take a look at on this fight. Obviously, I don't want to be anyone's guru. I don't want to tell you guys what bets to place. All I can share is what I've seen in my research, and what I've seen in my research, I do feel like Tecia Torres is a real strong position this weekend. Like I say, do your own research, watch the fights, check up on everything I'm about to share with you yourself. All you gotta do is go on Fight Pass and look at the past fights to kind of verify what I'm gonna talk about. But I do think Tecia Torres is a pretty good bet here. So if we take a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Tecia Torres is currently around about an average of 1.72, which is minus 139 for an implied probability of 58%. And if we take a look at the odds on Angela Hill, she's currently around about an average of 2.15, which is plus 115 for an implied probability of 47%. So if we take a look at the tail of the tape on this one, Angela Hill is now 36 years old, which is really old for a fighter in the lighter weight classes. 36 years old for a strawweight just isn't good. And we know that father time can creep up on you very quickly. When you reach the age of 36, you can start to decline very rapidly. And I think there are subtle signs that Angela Hill is on a decline. There are things that you can spot in her last few fights that suggest that, father time is coming knocking for Hill. And, I think there's trouble ahead for Hill, if I'm being honest. I think this is a tough stylistic matchup for her, and I think 36 years old as a strawweight, a lighter weight class that relies a lot on speed, movement, reflexes. Hill has shown very, very clear signs in her last few fights that she's starting to decline. We'll talk about those in a minute. Whereas I feel like at 31 years old, Tecia Torres is just hitting her prime. I feel like Tecia Torres is still improving. She's looked a lot better in her last two fights than she's ever looked before. And so for me, I just see two fighters on opposite career trajectories. I see Angela Hill kind of, reaching the tail end of her career now. I know that there will always be anomalies and exceptions to the rule. There will be fighters like Daniel Cormier that will, go well into his 40s being an elite fighter. But generally speaking, the further you get away from the age of 33, the worse you get. And you would now expecting Angela Hill to be declining from fight to fight, whereas Torres is at that sweet spot now where you'd be expecting her to improve from fight to fight. Now, when you look at the size of these two, not a major size difference. Angela Hill's 5'3" with a 64.5-inch reach, so a bit of a size advantage over Tecia Torres, who's 5'1" with a 61-inch reach. Although I wouldn't be too concerned with that, because Tecia Torres is one of the smallest strawweights in the division. She always has been. She's one of the first strawweights to be signed by the UFC, and she's smaller than everyone that she fights, so she's more than used to that. So there's so much to talk about in this one. But in terms of the fight research, we were really blessed with this fight because both girls have faced very similar stylistic opponents very recently, which enabled us to kind of get a bit of a glimpse as to how these two girls match up with each other. So what I mean by that is Tecia Torres has, fought Marina Rodriguez only 3 fights ago. And personally, I feel that Marina Rodriguez has got a very similar style to Angela Hill. They've got a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses. The only difference is Marina Rodriguez is a lot better than Angela Hill. So Rodriguez, for me, is just a much, much better version of Angela Hill. They've both got a base in Muay Thai. They've both got questionable takedown defense. They're both very weak on the ground. They're both strong in the clinch. They've got that Muay Thai style. They both fight long. And I just think that seeing how Tecia Torres dealt with the Muay Thai of Rodriguez really helps us, predict how she's likely to do against Angela Hill. And of course, it wasn't that long ago that Angela Hill fought Michelle Waterson, who's also very much like Tecia Torres. Waterson has a kicks-based style of striking exactly like Tecia. She used wrestling against Angela Hill. She's also quite small and compact like Tecia Torres. And Waterson also likes to fight in the same range as Tecia. So Waterson's got that base in karate. Torres has got that base in taekwondo. I know that her Tapology page says it's Muay Thai, but it's actually taekwondo. And what that means is, both these girls like to fight in a range where they're either all the way out of a distance where they can be hit, or all the way inside blitzing their opponents. And so we got to see how Angela Hill kind of looked against that style with Michelle Waterson, and how she dealt with the grappling of Michelle Waterson. So if this fight stays standing, I do think it's going to be razor close. One of the problems that Tecia Torres has had throughout her career is that she really struggles to put her stamp on rounds. I think a lot of it is because of her size, and a lot of it is because she puts defense first. We were talking about, in the last fight, how good Casey Kenny's striking defense was. And Tecia Torres' striking defense is absolutely phenomenal. She does such a good job of reading her opponents and managing the distance. Her footwork and head movement is quite spectacular, and it's very difficult to land clean on Tecia. Marina Rodriguez, one of the nastiest strikers in the division. When you fight Marina, everyone takes major damage. And yet, Torres came out of that fight mostly unscathed. She did a really good job staying on the outside, reading Marina Rodriguez, and staying out of trouble. It was quite impressive. And this is significant for me because remember, just at the beginning of this breakdown, we were talking about how Angela Hill was starting to show signs of a decline. One of the first signs of a decline in an aging fighter is when their volume starts to drop. And the reason why that's a sign of a decline is because they see the same openings that they used to, but for whatever reason, when the reflexes start to go, they can't think quick enough to execute on what they've seen. So, for example, say a fighter moves in a certain way, they may not be able to react to them moving, in that way and firing off a counter shot like they could in the past. For whatever reason, older fighters just don't think as fast. Their reflexes don't work in the same way. And for that reason, they end up becoming either less accurate or their volume drops. Quite often, both those things happen. Now, very recently, we saw Ashley Yoder fight Jinyu Frey and also Verna Jandiroba. No, not Verna Jandiroba, sorry. Lavinia Renata Souza, right? Got them mixed up. Lavinia Renata Souza and Jinyu Frey. And we know that neither Souza nor Frey is a particularly skilled, particularly dangerous striker. And yet both Souza and Frey were able to light Ashley Yoder up inflict major damage, and, you know, expose Yoda as having very bad boxing defense, right? We were speaking about this in the breakdown video last week when we were going through the Yoda versus Frey fight. So if you're a striker like Angela Hill, you know, if you're supposed to be one of the best strikers in the division, at the top of the division, and you're fighting someone like Ashley Yoda, you should be lighting her up like a fucking Christmas tree, you know? We know how bad Yoda is defensively. You would expect Angela Hill to put an absolute clinic on against Ashley Yoda. And if you go back and watch that fight, that is not how this fight went down at all. If you go and watch that fight, when both girls are stood in the middle of the octagon in kickboxing range, Angela Hill is painfully inaccurate. She just can't land on Ashley Yoda. And now I know Yoda is a lot longer and a lot taller, so we could say, you know, it's harder for Hill to get inside on someone like Yoda than it would be for her to get inside on someone smaller like Tisha. But Yoda has shown that she can't read her opponent. She can't see her shots coming. Her opponent's shots come in. She's very bad defensively, and yet Hill had virtually zero success fighting Yoda at distance. The only time Hill had success with her striking is when she came forward, forced Yoda to move back in a straight line, and when Yoda was trapped with her back against the cage, Hill would start wailing on her with big hooks and get to the clinch and land some big knees. But out in kickboxing range, Hill was completely ineffective. She couldn't land anything. This is very, very significant for me because, like I said, 36 years old, very old for a strawweight, and Angela Hill is not a fighter who used to be a low volume, passive kind of fighter, right? She used to be quite aggressive, used to throw a high volume, used to push a pace. I didn't see that from her against Yoda, which means that could be the first little sign of a decline here. But Torres struggles to put her stamp on rounds in stand-up fights. That's just the way it is. So if this fight does end up staying standing, I do think it's going to be razor close. And I think that might be one of the main reasons why both these girls are in that even money odds range. I think people are maybe looking at this and thinking Hill's got a base in Muay Thai, Tisha Torres has got a base in Taekwondo, and, you know, it's probably going to be a stand-up fight. Both these girls are strikers. But while I do think the fight is going to be very, very close if it stays standing, for me, it will not be a contest if Tisha Torres comes into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan. Angela Hill has really poor takedown defense and is very, very weak off her back. Tisha Torres has good offensive wrestling, great timing, great setups on her deep double leg takedowns. And if Torres comes into this fight and uses a lot of grappling, I honestly see her dominating Angela Hill. We also know that Angela Hill tends to slow down as the fight goes on. She tends to become sloppy, easier to hit, less able to stuff takedowns, whereas we know Torres has got an absolutely great gas tank. So for me, I honestly think Tisha Torres is worth your consideration this weekend as a potential bet. I don't want to tell anyone what to do, and this is certainly not a safe bet because, like I say, if Tisha doesn't use a lot of wrestling in this fight, or if she can't get Hill to the ground, I do believe it'll be very close. The really poor Texas judges also throw an additional element of risk into the mix. But if Torres comes out, uses a lot of grappling, she should be able to take Hill down and rack up a lot of top control. So for that reason, I think Torres is a pretty solid bet. If you look at the odds on this one, you know, implied probability on Torres, 57%. You've got to give her more than a 57% chance of winning when you take into consideration how big her advantages are on the ground. So I like Torres here, but it really depends on how much grappling she's willing to use. Sometimes fighters like Torres just get stubborn and they don't want to use their grappling. They want to prove a point by outstriking their opponent because they've got that base in striking. Sometimes they're stubborn, and there is some bad blood going into this matchup. So I think this is one of those fights where Torres can only beat herself. It'll be a cakewalk if she uses grappling, but we know that fighters don't always take the easiest path to victory, and I think that's probably the biggest risk factor to bet in Torres. So I hope you found that useful, boys. Oh, we're about to get into a really juicy one. Let me just grab a drink. Alright, boys. This is a fucking great one. Okay. So, I am trying to get better at I am trying to get better at explaining betting theory in these videos, because I think a big mistake I've made in the past is just assuming that betting theory is common sense, but it isn't, man. You know, we all have to learn betting theory. But because I've been doing this for so long, you know I'm a lot older than a lot of you watching these videos. I'm, you know, almost 38 years old. Sometimes stuff that is very very normal to me, like a regular part of my job, I assume is like normal to everyone else. And because of that, I do take a lot of abuse for guys that I think don't. I get a lot of abuse from guys that don't agree with me on certain fights. But I think it's perhaps because I haven't taken the time to explain the betting theory properly. So I'm going to try in the future now to just do a better job of explaining the theory. So instead of being like, there's no way you could bet that guy because it completely violates like that one betting theory rule that you never break. So instead of me talking like that, I'm going to explain what the betting theory is, so that hopefully, even if people don't agree with the side I lean towards, they'll at least understand the betting theory behind it, right? And that's very applicable to this matchup between Michael Chiesa and Vicente Luque. So let's talk about the fight between Michael Chiesa and Vicente Luque. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this matchup, we can see that Michael Chiesa is currently around about an average of, call it 2.0, which is plus 100 for an implied probability of 50%. And if we take a look at the odds on Vicente Luque, he's currently around about an average of 1.91, which is minus 110 for an implied probability of 52%. So it's another one of those matchups in that even money odds range, which I love. It's like I always say, implied probability on both guys is about 50%. So if we can lean 60-40 one way or the other, that's a strong position for us to put our cash. Now, I honestly felt that Vicente Luque would be free money this week. He was the first guy that I researched out of all the fights on this card. I thought I would be betting Vicente Luque absolutely huge this week. I just thought he was a terrible stylistic matchup for Michael Chiesa. But when I researched this fight, I didn't like what I saw from Luque at all. And this was one of those research sessions where I flip-flopped between leaning towards both guys. And this is one of those fights where I promise you, man, I've been doing this for 12 years. I spend, 15 to 20 hours, researching fights every week. I've made a lot of money betting on MMA. So I'm coming from a place where I'm trying to help you. These fights are just impossible fights to predict, because Chiesa and Luque have such extreme weaknesses that the other fighter is, skilled enough to exploit. That this really is a fight that is the equivalent of the flip of a coin. And when you're trying to work out who to bet on this fight, it's very difficult, because the human brain obviously is designed to, find confirmation bias, right? So these type of fights tend to be very trappy and very difficult to make money on, because unless you've been doing this a really, really long time and you've had an opportunity to reprogram that, that confirmation bias specifically for betting, you can fall into traps. And what I mean by that is Michael Chiesa has an absolutely enormous advantage over Luque when it comes to grappling. It is literally levels and levels and levels above Luque, right? If this fight goes to the ground, Luque's fucking screwed. But then on the flip side, Luque has an enormous advantage over Michael Chiesa standing. If this fight stays standing, Chiesa has no hope. And so fights like this are complex, because people will set up two different camps. And you'll either have the camp of people that will be like, I'm betting Chiesa because Chiesa's an amazing grappler, Luque's terrible on the ground, Chiesa's going to win. Now, everything that they said there is true, apart from the fact that Chiesa's going to win. no one can deny that Michael Chiesa has a huge advantage over Luque on the ground. And if the fight goes to the ground, Luque's screwed. No one can deny that. That is factual. We've got the fight footage to prove it. That's not an opinion, that's fact. The problem is, with the way the human brain works, confirmation bias may mean that you only see that. You only see the fact that Chiesa is going to be able to take Luque down and dominate him on the ground, right? And then you completely ignore the other side of the coin, where Luque's advantages over Chiesa's standing are so substantial that Chiesa is going to be at constant risk of being knocked out when this fight is in that stand-up, striking range. And so the exact same thing applies to that camp. There will be some people that will be like, Chiesa gas is bad, his striking defense is very bad, he's got no power in his hands, he doesn't move well, all this kind of stuff. And you're like, yeah, all that's correct, but it doesn't change the fact that none of that matters if Chiesa takes him down. So this is one of those fights where when you see people online that are like, I'm betting Chiesa because of this reason, or other people will be like, I'm betting Luque because of this reason, I don't think either camp is looking at the full picture. And I was very much in the Luque camp. Coming into researching this fight, I was like, Luque is going to keep this fight standing, turn Chiesa into a panic wrestler, and smoke him. And it's not until you go and watch the footage and you look at, Luque on the ground, Luque at defending takedowns, you're like, you know what, hang on a minute. If Chiesa gets this guy down, he's screwed. So this is one of those fights where nobody is right on this. There are no right people in the world. If someone goes out and they says, so if you hear someone say Chiesa's going to win because of this, and this, and then Chiesa goes out and wins because of the things they said, I promise you that they weren't right. That's just how the cards fell on that night. Similarly, if you see someone say Luque's going to win because of this, and this, they weren't right. It's just that's how the cards fell. Point I'm trying to make is both these guys have an equal probability of winning, and absolutely no one knows who's going to come out on top until we see it unfold on Saturday night. Because there are facts that exist here. There are concrete, rock solid facts that you can see in the fight research. And let me talk you through these facts. The fact is, Michael Chiesa is an absolute fucking nightmare on the ground. His grappling control is brilliant. He's one of those fighters that is just abnormally heavy. Some fighters have this gift where when they get on top of you, they just have this crushing kind of top game and you can't get them off. Damian Maia's a good example. Even Roxanne Modafferi is like it. You get no space to move on the bottom, and once they take you down, it's like a death sentence. They can rack up a lot of control. Now, Michael Chiesa's not the best offensive wrestler. He does struggle to get fights to the ground, but he does have decent body lock takedowns, and because he's long and tall, he does a really good job of creating leverage off his long arms that upset his opponent's balance. Chiesa is a nightmare on the ground. Unfortunately, I also believe Chiesa is a one-round fighter in that, for whatever reason, his gas tank is just very bad. It doesn't matter if he's fighting at lightweight. It doesn't matter if he's fighting at welterweight. Chiesa is very, very good for one round, but with every round that follows, he becomes significantly less effective. So what you usually see from Chiesa is in round one, the guy is a fucking nightmare. He's an absolute nightmare. His grappling's almost impossible to deal with. In round two, he's somewhat effective. His grappling is still quite dangerous, but he doesn't generate as much drive on his takedown attempts. He's not as persistent with his grappling, and standing up, he's very sloppy, very easy to hit, very flat-footed, and basically has no striking offense. And by round three, Chiesa's usually donezo, completely done. So for me, he's more of a one-round fighter. This means that it is a good stylistic matchup for Luque if he can make it out of round one. And this is why I do lean towards Luque still. I don't lean towards Luque with tons of confidence, but I do still lean towards him. The problem with Luque is that he is a very, very, very low level on the ground. Like, I was kind of shocked researching this one. I thought Luque was a much better grappler than he is. And this fight actually reminds me of the Stephen Thompson versus Gilbert Burns fight a few weeks ago. I don't know if you guys remember the breakdown we did for that fight, but remember I said that Stephen Thompson versus Burns was a difficult one to bet because through some weird turn of events, we hadn't really seen Stephen Thompson face many grapplers. You know, he had kind of fought strikers for the vast majority of his career. We hadn't really seen his takedown defense tested that much. And the same can be said about Vicente Luque. You know, Tyron Woodley, that fight was just a brawl, ended very quickly. You know, Randy Brown did attempt one takedown in that fight and took him down. You know, Nico Price took Luque down a couple times. This was a stand-up fight. Derek Krantz took Luque down. You know, Brian Barberine is a striker. Jalen Turner's a striker. Chad LaPriest a striker. Nico Price a striker. Leon Edwards a striker. You know, this fight ended very quickly. Hector Urbina is a striker. Alvaro Herrera is a striker. Haider Hassan's a striker. And then Mike Graves is a grappler. And he beat Luque easily. If you go back and watch this fight, Luque got absolutely dominated by Mike Graves, who is probably the last really strong wrestler that Luque has fought, aside from obviously Woodley, that didn't get a chance to use his wrestling, very rarely does use his wrestling. So this is one of those interesting fights where Luque is an exciting fighter, we all love him, he's one of the best welterweights in the world, but he's been able to climb up through the ranks, you know, and put on these amazing fights for us, because he's been very fortunate with matchmaking. He hasn't really fought many grapplers, and every time we've seen a guy use grappling against him, he's looked really low level. You know, if you want a quick snapshot of why Luque can get himself into a lot of trouble here, I strongly recommend you go and watch his fight against Derek Krantz. It's only going to take 4 minutes of your day, but that fight against Derek Krantz shows why it's very difficult to bet on Luque here, because Krantz takes him down easily and gets to his back very, very easily. And one of the most concerning things about Luque for me is that he's very casual with his submission defense. He leaves his neck hanging out there. He's kind of slow to react to what his opponent's doing on the ground. He's got a laid-back, casual style of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu where I do feel he can get caught in irrecoverably bad positions because he doesn't react quick enough. And we know Michael Chiesa has got a nasty submission game. The speed at which this guy can take you back and lock in a rear naked choke is frightening. He's very, very, very dangerous. And the thing is, Luque gives his back up a lot. However, Luque is a phenomenal striker. He's got an amazing gas tank, throws a nice diverse range of strikes, nasty leg kicks, great boxing, and a cardio gas tank to push an insane pace for 3 rounds. So this is one of those fights where, based on how bad Luque's takedown defense and ground game is, I think Chiesa's going to absolutely dominate the fight early. But if Luque can just survive on the ground and make it into the second half of the fight, I think there's a very good chance that Luque knocks Michael Chiesa out here. This is all going to come down to how many points can Chiesa score before he gasses bad. Because we know Chiesa will gas. He always gasses. I would say by the 3rd round of this fight, Chiesa is going to be in survival mode fighting for his life. He's usually so tired by round 3, and Luque is still so dangerous in round 3 that Chiesa will be, if he doesn't get a finish early, Chiesa's going to be in major, major, major trouble in round 3. But I think Chiesa's going to absolutely dominate round 1. I wouldn't even rule out a 10-8 round, taking Luque down, getting his back and just dominating for the full 5 minutes. I think this fight is really going to be decided by round 2. How much gas does Chiesa have in round 2? Does he have enough gas in the tank to get Luque down, establish a dominant position, and win that 2nd round? Or does he start to fade towards the end of the 2nd round and give Luque a window of opportunity to nick it? This fight will be decided by round 2. Chiesa will win round 1. Luque's probably going to win round 3. It all comes down to round 2. It doesn't matter, how much you know about the sport, how much fight research you do. It really doesn't matter who you are. Not even Chiesa and Luque can answer that question. The only way we're going to get an answer to that question is on Saturday night. So this is a very difficult fight for betting. Like I say, initially I leaned Luque, then I considered a bet on Chiesa. I now flip back to leaning Luque but not with any amount of confidence. It's a tricky, complex fight, this, and I can't wait to see what happens. I really can't. It's going to be a fun one. This fight is probably going to divide a lot of people. I am completely torn on it. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Chiesa's going to get it done? Do you think Luque is going to get it done? I can't pick a winner here. I slightly side Luque just because I'd prefer to bet on a fighter who can fight to his full potential for 15 minutes as opposed to just 5. But it's tricky. It is very, very tricky. Let me know. Let me know what you think. So yeah, hope you found that useful. Okay, into the next fight. We'll have another little drinky poo. Alright, boys. Into the next one. So we just spoke about a complicated fight between Vicente Luque and, Michael Chiesa. We got another complicated fight now between Jose Aldo and Pedro Munoz. So let's talk about the fight between Jose Aldo and Pedro Munoz. So these two fighters are in that even money odds range, right? Both guys basically, alright. Aldo the slight favourite. Average odds of about, call it 1.87, which is minus 115 for an implied probability of 53%. Now, if we look at the odds on Pedro Munoz, he's currently around about an average of 1.95, which is minus 115 for an implied probability of 53%. So coming into researching this fight, I didn't really have a lean either way. It was one of those fights where I kind of felt that both guys would have path to victory, and until I saw the footage, I couldn't really commit. I didn't have a strong lean. I went into this fight with a very open mind. If we look at the tail of the tape, we can see that Jose Aldo's 34 years old, 5'7" with a 70-inch reach, whereas Pedro Munoz, 34 years old, 5'6" with a 65-inch reach. So that does give Aldo a massive 5-inch reach advantage here, which is substantial because Aldo is a master of distance control, reads his opponent very well. That 5-inch reach advantage is going to enable Aldo to land on Pedro Munoz from, a range where Munoz isn't going to be able to counter until, unless he really covers distance and gets inside, gets inside that reach and fights Jose Aldo in close proximity, which is not an easy thing to do with how dangerous Aldo is. But if we look at this fight, we don't really have to consider grappling. Both these guys are... Munoz does have a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? But for the most part, these guys like to keep fights standing. And the reason why I think this will be a stand-up fight is because, in my opinion, Jose Aldo has the best takedown defense in the history of MMA. Aldo's not going to want this fight to go to the ground. And I don't think Pedro Munoz has got the offensive wrestling to get this fight to the ground. So it should be a stand-up fight. Based on the research for this fight, though, it is a very, very complex one. It's one of those fights where I heavily lean Aldo if both guys show up and perform to their full potential. And that's where the problem with this fight first arises. If both these guys show up and perform to their full potential, I think Jose Aldo absolutely smokes Pedro Munoz. I think there's even a good chance that Aldo knocks Pedro Munoz out. Now, I know that Pedro Munoz has never been finished before, but Munoz is quite bad defensively. He's very easy to hit. He does take a lot of damage in fights. And it's not like we haven't seen Pedro Munoz rocked in the past. He got rocked by Jimmy Rivera, rocked by Frankie Edgar, rocked by Cody Garbrandt. He's definitely there to be hit, but no one's managed to put him away yet. Jose Aldo is still ridiculously fast, ruthlessly accurate, carries big power in his hands. And while a lot of his fights over the last few years have ended, in a decision, don't let that mislead you into thinking this guy's not still dangerous, because he definitely is. The shots that knock you out are the ones you don't see coming. And Munoz doesn't do a great job of reading his opponent's boxing and getting out the way. I think Aldo can definitely land a kill shot here. The problem with Aldo is that there's just not enough volume. And this is my big issue with Aldo. At this stage in his career, he does tend to slow down and become less effective as the fight wears on. So because of that, he needs to kind of pace himself and, not throw too much so that he doesn't exert too much energy. Aldo instead, spreads his output out over 3 rounds. But what this means is you get long periods of inactivity for Aldo where he doesn't do a lot. That's the complete opposite with Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz is a high volume striker, pushes a high pace. He's constantly coming forward, constantly throwing. And while he might not be as fast or as technical or as good defensively as Aldo, he's scrappy and he brings it. And, that in itself could cause Aldo trouble here. Aldo's one of these guys that fights a little bit like Derek Lewis. So we'll be talking about, obviously, we talked about Derek Lewis. But when we were doing the fight research live stream for this fight, Momo actually made an even better comparison for Aldo than Derek Lewis. And he said Aldo is turning into Tyron Woodley. And I absolutely love that comparison. Because remember when Tyron Woodley became champion, he kind of developed this fighting style where guys knew he was majorly powerful, right? We all saw the highlight reels on Tyron Woodley's, run to the title of him just knocking guys out like 12 feet across the octagon. And so people really did respect Woodley's power. And they were afraid to engage with him for fear of eating a nuclear missile of a right hand and getting death shotted. And Woodley used that to his advantage to pace himself, where then he developed this style of fighting where he would kind of stay on the outside, with his back tight to the cage, and he would just, pick his spots to come forward, blitz forward with big power punches. And he hoped that when guys felt his power, that would deter them from attacking him a lot and pushing a high pace. And he would rely on cracking him with one big shot, so they think, fuck that, I'm not going to attack him because I don't want to poke the bear and then for him to come forward and land something big and hurt me. Aldo uses exactly the same strategy to pace himself. He doesn't fight in the same range as Woodley, but he does plant his feet, in kickboxing range, and he waits for you to go first for the most part. Waits for you to go first, and then he fires back. And he hopes that whatever he fires back with hurts you or scares you so much that you don't attack him that much. You kind of go into a defensive shell. You get deterred by his attacks. And the problem with that style is potentially going to work very well for Aldo, or potentially blow up in his face. It could work well for Aldo because when he does blitz forward and attack Munoz, he does sit down very hard and commit very hard to his attacks, and Munoz is bad defensively. So perhaps Aldo lands something big and KOs him. But the way that it could backfire for Aldo is I don't expect Munoz to play that game. We know how tough Munoz is. We've seen him take an enormous amount of damage in his fights. This is a guy with a very good chin. And, while it's not a good thing that he relies on his chin so much, because eventually, he is going to start to find himself getting knocked out a lot. You can't deny that he could take a shot, man. And so the style that will cause a guy like Aldo trouble is someone that is tough enough to just walk him down. Because remember, we said he wants to deter you. When he blitzes forward and lands these big power strikes, he wants you to just take your foot off the gas and then give him the time and space he needs to control his breathing, control his heart rate and pace himself. If you don't play that game, if every time he blitzes forward and lands big shots on you, you just stay right on top of him and keep pressing him and keep forcing him to work, a guy like Aldo can slow down very quickly. And this is kind of what we saw, past the second round of the Peter Yan fight. If you go and watch the third round in the Peter Yan fight, Yan just started walking through Aldo's shots, and as soon as he did that, Aldo became very easy to hit, very sloppy, and his hand speed just wasn't as fast. He wasn't as accurate with his strikes. That Nate Diaz style of pressure is kryptonite for a guy like Aldo, and that's what Munoz brings to the table. The only problem is Aldo has the power, the technique, the speed, and the accuracy to send you to the shadow realm and knock you out, and Munoz is definitely there to be hit. So this is one of those fights where I expect Aldo to do really well early and a little bit like Michael Chiesa struggle late on. The question is, will Munoz still be conscious late on, or will Aldo have knocked him out? That's how I kind of see this fight going. So it's a complicated one because Aldo definitely has the skills to knock him out. I know on paper it's unlikely because Aldo's gone to a lot of decisions and Munoz has never been finished, but Munoz's boxing defense is legitimately bad, and to be fair, hasn't really fought many guys as dangerous as Aldo. So, with that, Munoz is probably going to take a lot of damage early, But, you know, in the second half of that fight, when Munoz keeps pouring it on with his pressure, I would expect Aldo to struggle quite badly. So it's an interesting fight in that respect, because you can make a case for both guys winning. And it's very difficult for me to lean either way here. This really comes down to, is Munoz going to be capable of walking through Aldo's shots? We know he's got a chin. We know he's tough. But he's never fought anyone that can punish him for his bad defense like Aldo can. So it's a tricky one. What I would say about Aldo, though, is he's also becoming a little bit inconsistent. So remember I said right at the beginning of the breakdown video, like, if both guys are at their best, I think Aldo absolutely smokes him. But the problem is, you know, at times he looks very good and at times he doesn't. You know, if we look back at his last 4 fights, basically did nothing against Alexander Volkanovski. It was a very poor performance. Then against Marlon Moraes, he looked great in round 1, but then didn't do anything in the second and third round. Very low volume, very passive style. Against Peter Yan, you know, he did all right in the first 2 rounds and then, you know, completely faded. You know, gassed really bad in round 3, and then we all know what happened in the 4th and 5th. Against Marlon Vera, Aldo looked amazing in round 1. You know, looked like a potential future world champion. I know he has been a world champion. I mean, he looked capable of getting his belt back based on the first round performance against Vera. But then didn't really do anything in round 2. And then got a little bit lucky by catching Vera in a bad position in round 3. So Jose Aldo, I feel, is one of these guys that is very difficult to bet on him, because he's so passive, so low volume, that he's going to be one of these guys that has you shouting at your TV to actually do something because he holds back so much. But then he's also one of these guys that's very dangerous to bet against, because he's absolutely brilliant, and on his day, one of the best fighters one of the best bantamweights in the world. And so, you know, when you're betting on a guy as dangerous as Aldo against someone as bad defensively as Munoz, you know, probably not the strongest position to have your cash. I think, like a lot of fights on this card, you can make a case for either guy winning this one. I am struggling to go with a lean here. I would probably say, I don't know, I'd probably say Aldo, but then from a different perspective, I might go Munoz. I find this one really hard. So I'm sorry I can't be more useful to you with that one, but I hope you did find it useful. Okay, so we now move on to the main event between Cyril Gane and Derek Lewis, which is a very, very, very interesting fight. And I want to play you a couple of clips from when I researched this matchup this week, because I changed my perspective on this fight big time during the fight research session. This was one of those fights where, you know, after 15-20 minutes, I was feeling very strongly that one guy would win. But then as the live stream went on, I completely changed my mind. So take a look at these 2 clips, and then I'm going to explain why I changed my mind so dramatically, and you know, why I do think there's a really good betting opportunity on this fight. He looks bad defensively. He's very slow. Okay, so this is basically a clip of me early on in the fight research session for Derek Lewis and Cyril Gane. And don't forget, if you want to join me for these fight research sessions, they're completely free. All you need to do is go to Twitch. Link in the description below, twitch.tv/Diary of a Pro Gambler. And if you want to get notifications whenever I go live, all you need to do is go to my website, roll the mouse over community, go to mobile notifications, and you'll find some instructions on how to join our Telegram group. Basically, anytime I'm about to do a fight research live stream, you'll get notified. So yeah, if this kind of thing interests you, come on board, man. It's so much fun researching these fights as a group. Definitely give it a try. But anyway, this is how I felt about this fight about 15 to 20 minutes into the research stream. He's very sloppy. He looks bad defensively. He's got jabbed to the body, and he kind of, his hands dropped. He didn't like it. Like, we know how vicious Gane's body kicks are and body shots. Like, there's no way I would bet Lewis here. Like, he does have a puncher's chance, but he is outgunned here bad. He's outgunned here really bad. This is a real bad stylistic matchup for Lewis, man. It is. I was hoping that I would see a bit more from him, but He looks very sloppy, and I just feel like someone as technical as Gan is going to be able to pick him off. Okay, so that was how I felt about 15 to 20 minutes into the fight research stream, and then by the end, I felt like this. Lewis is definitely a bet for me, 100%. 100%. 100%. Lewis is definitely a bet for me, 100%. 100%. 100%. Okay, so how the fuck did I go from saying that Lewis has basically got no chance here to betting him? Like, how the fuck do you change your mind so much, right? Obviously, it all boils down to the fight research. This is why fight research is so important, because it shows you what is true. That's why I always, like, people think I'm being arrogant when I say things like, you know, the stuff I say, you know, in these videos is factual. It's not an opinion. That's not arrogant. Literally all it is. You know, when you look at the footage, a lot of this stuff is black and white. You know, you can look at, you know, a previous fight, and you can just see what a fighter's strengths and weaknesses are. Just like you can look out the window and see that the color of grass is green, right? And this is one of those fight research sessions where, when you first start to watch footage on these two guys, you're like, my God, Cyril Gane is way too fast, way too technical, way too well-rounded. You know, Lewis is very susceptible to leg kicks, body kicks. You know, he's a low-volume striker. He's quite awkward. Gane's just going to be able to fight in that same range we saw him fighting against Volkov. Pepper Lewis with leg kicks and body kicks, and it's going to be an easy night's work for Gane. And you know what? That probably is the most likely outcome, right? Gane probably is going to win this fight. I certainly don't think Lewis is the safest bet here, but he is the bet that gives us a very good risk to reward ratio on this card. So I really want to talk to you guys about the betting theory behind this bet, because it's again something I don't think I've done a very good job educating my audience on, and I hope we can use fights like this as an example to kind of, you know, discuss betting theories which we may not use that often, because we don't bet underdogs this big that often, right? So let's talk about what I mean, man. So if we look at the current odds, Cyril Gane is a 1.27 favourite, which is minus 370 for an implied probability of 79%. If you take a look at the odds on Derek Lewis, he's currently around about an average of 3.80, which is plus 280 for an implied probability of 26%. So, if you were to ask me who is more likely to win, Derek Lewis or Cyril Gane, I would absolutely tell you Cyril Gane is more likely to win, right? If we go to my website and we go to the pre-fight betting tips, let's go into the strategy guide for this event. We just scroll down a little bit here. If you look at this, right, who I think will win? Cyril Gane. Who I think is the better bet? Derek Lewis. And this is where betting theory becomes really important, because a lot of people confuse picks and bets as being the same thing, right? If I'm in a picks contest, I'm taking Cyril Gane to win by knockout or TKO. But we're not in a picks contest. Making money from betting MMA is all about putting your money in strong positions and finding bets with a really good risk to reward ratio. And if you do consistently put your money in strong positions and only place bets with a great risk to reward ratio, over the long term, you're going to make a lot of money. You look at the profitability charts on my website, you know, go over to the results page. Every single type of bet that we've got on our website is profitable, right? Loose bets are profitable. You know, live bets are profitable. You know, we scroll down, type bets are profitable. Over under bets are profitable. Even money bets are profitable. You know, prop bets are profitable. Every single type of bet on our website is profitable. And the reason why we're so profitable is because we use these principles no matter what type of fight that we're dealing with. So like I say, I do think Cyril Gane is most likely to win this weekend. But in terms of a good risk to reward ratio, I think Derek Lewis has got an absolutely brilliant risk to reward ratio. Because if you look at what Derek Lewis is very good at, and you look at Cyril Gane's biggest weakness, I think Lewis is very well equipped to exploit that weakness. And I'll explain what that is in a moment. I hope that makes sense to you, though. Like, when I talk about finding bets with a good risk to reward ratio, I'm talking about bets where you're getting a really good deal. So, the way I would describe it is, imagine you go shopping for some clothes, right? And, there's a rack of clothes and there's like a sweater on the rack that you like, okay? Sometimes you'll go up to that rack and you'll be like, how much is this sweater? I really like it. You know what I mean? It's got a picture of like a tiger on it or something. You fucking want that sweater. And you look at the price and you're like, oh my God, that's like way too expensive. You know what I mean? I'm not paying that price. And you put it back on the rail. Another time you'll go up to the sweater and you look at the price and you'll be like, it's reasonable price. I'm not sure about it. Like, maybe I'll buy it now, or maybe I'll just put it back on the rail, and if it's still there when I get paid next month, maybe I'll pick it up then. The price you feel is fair, but you don't feel like you're getting a great price. Bets that fall into those two categories, where they're way too expensive, or you're like the price is okay, you want to just avoid them. Fucking forget about those bets. They're dead to you. Fights like Luque versus Chiesa this week. Luque versus Chiesa is one of those, say you want to bet Luque, the price is okay. Yeah, it's got a good risk to reward ratio, I suppose. Even money 1-to-1, it's alright. Fuck it off. Ignore those bets. You want to go for the bet where you walk over to that rail, see that fucking sweater with a picture of a tiger on it, look at the price and go, oh my God, I cannot believe that is so cheap. The colours, the fabrics, the material, amazing quality. That sweater is such good value. I need to buy it right now. Those are the type of bets. Those are the type of things you want to look for. The bets with a good risk to reward ratio. The bets with a good price. And Derek Lewis has that price. Because Derek Lewis has one thing he does well. And Cyril Gane has one huge weakness. And the thing that Lewis does well exploits that one weakness in Cyril Gane. And it's as simple as that. If you can bet a big underdog in a situation where they have the one skill which can exploit their opponent's one weakness, that's a strong position for you to put your money. So if you put $100 on Derek Lewis, you get $280 profit back for every 100 you bet. Such a great deal. You can triple your money if Lewis can just exploit that one weakness that we know he's going to be trying all night to exploit. We're going to talk about that weakness in a little bit, but we're going to start off by discussing the occasion and the X factors behind this matchup. I'm not saying, again, I need to make it very clear, because I know if Derek Lewis goes out and gets folded with a body shot in a minute, there will be people like, you're a fool, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, how could you have bet Derek Lewis? Just understand, I do think Cyril Gane is more likely to win. But the guy that gives you the best risk to reward ratio, the guy that gives you an amazing risk to reward ratio, is you can get treble your money in a situation where he has a reasonably good chance of winning. That's the guy you got to bet. If I'm in a picks contest, I go Cyril Gane. If I'm trying to make money long term, change my life, do big things, I'm taking Derek Lewis. And that's the difference. People confuse picks with bets. Derek Lewis gives you a good risk to reward ratio this week, even though he's not that likely to win. And I know that doesn't make sense, but come over to my website, man. Hang out with us in the chat rooms. We discuss these kind of theories all the time. Trust me, the reason why every single type of bet on our website is profitable is because we use betting theory like this. We only place bets with a great risk to reward ratio, and it doesn't matter whether that bet wins or loses, because we always have our money in those spots. Over the long term, the profitability charts just do that, and it really is as simple as that. So let's talk about this fight, man. Getting excited about this one, it's such a good fight. I want to start off by saying, it's another contradiction, I think Cyril Gane is an absolutely amazing fighter. I just switch over to my other camera. You can see that I am so high on Cyril Gane that I have invested heavily in his rookie cards. So I'm not sure if you guys know about UFC trading cards. They're brand new out. But you'll know that the cards that I've got in front of me are not cheap to acquire, right? Cyril Gane rookie cards are quite expensive. And look, I've got a purple one there, numbered 50 of 149s. There's a purple. We've got a red prism. Nice little red prism there. And we've got a silver prism. You know, a couple base cards. You know, you look, we got even more. It gets better than that. This is the better pile here. We've got a red one. You know, red Cyril Gane Prism. We got an orange. You know, we got a very special Mojo card. You know, there's only 25 of them in the world. That's number 24 or 25. We got a teal. Got a silver. And we got some base cards. So I'm very, very, very high on Cyril Gane. I think he's brilliant. I think he's got a huge future in the sport. I don't think it matters what happens this weekend. I honestly think that, you know, he's going to be a future champion. He's certainly good enough. You know, for him to be this good at this stage in his career, it's unbelievable. He's only had 9 pro fights. He's got such a solid base to work from for him being this inexperienced, that I think Cyril Gane's got the potential to be the greatest heavyweight of all time. I can't remember the last time I saw a heavyweight at this age look this good. You know, 31 years old is an absolute baby for a heavyweight. And Cyril Gane has got such a bright future for himself in the sport that I think this guy is going to be incredible. And obviously I'm investing in his career by picking up those rookie cards. Those rookies weren't cheap. However, I do wonder whether this fight is too much too soon for Gane. You know, if you look at Gane's record, his last fight against Alexander Volkov was a big fight, but it was in the comfort of the Apex Center behind closed doors. You know, the Jairzinho Rosenstrike was a fight where Rosenstrike didn't really attack Gane. He didn't really test him that much. You know, we know Junior Dos Santos is on a very steep decline, and we know that before that, Gane only fought a very, very low level of opposition. So Gane is an amazing fighter, but he is entering into a fight this weekend at a level that he has never even got close to. Derek Lewis is a popular hometown fighter. You know, this event is taking place at Texas in a sold-out arena. You know, those fans are going to be very, very hyped, very loud, you know, very, very lively, you know, when those fighters walk out for the main event on Saturday night. And Derek Lewis is from Houston, right? Houston, Texas. They absolutely love him in Texas. If you go back and watch the pay-per-view a couple months ago they did in Texas, the Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal event, you know when the UFC do that thing where they kind of pan around the crowd and they'll show you like, you know, Miley Cyrus and the crowd will go crazy, and then they'll show you like Justin Bieber and the crowd will go crazy, and Snoop Dogg, and everyone's like, woo, Snoop, and they'll show you a couple NBA, NFL players, everyone will go nuts. All those celebrities get a good reaction, but when Derek Lewis appeared on camera, the whole fucking place erupted. It erupted to the fact where the roof practically came off the place. Now think about what it's going to be like in there when he walks out on Saturday night. Imagine the electricity in the atmosphere when this fight is about to start. Cyril Gane has never experienced anything like that, anything even close to that in his life. He has never experienced the sound of those fans pounding on his chest because of how loud it is in there. They've never experienced, you know, he's never experienced getting booed by 20,000 people. He doesn't know what it feels like to hear the crowd roar every single time his opponent does anything remotely successful. The crowd are going to be behind Derek Lewis big time on Saturday night. And in every single sport that exists, home advantage is a big deal. And it's an especially big deal when you're dealing with inexperience. Derek Lewis has fought on a lot of big cards. He's fought on a lot of main events. He's fought on a lot of pay-per-views. He's got over 32 pro fights. He's nasty. He's aggressive. He's vicious. He's got that killer instinct. And he's probably going to be fueled by the crowd. I don't know how well Cyril Gane is going to react to the crowd on Saturday night. But like I say, home advantage is a factor in every single sport. And it's no different to MMA. When that cage door locks on Saturday night and the crowd are roaring and cheering for Derek Lewis, is Cyril Gane going to be ready for that with only 9 pro fights? Because Derek Lewis made a really good point this week. Cyril Gane has to be perfect for 25 minutes because Lewis only needs to land 1 shot and it's over. Which brings me on to why I do like Derek Lewis here. So in terms of technique, let's not beat around the bush. Cyril Gane is significantly better than Derek Lewis in every single aspect of MMA. We know that Lewis's takedown defense isn't great. We know he's very weak off his back. We know that his striking defense isn't good. We know he's a low volume striker. And we know he's very susceptible to leg kicks and body kicks, which happen to be Gann's best weapon. But the one thing Derek Lewis does have is an ungodly amount of power. And for such a big guy, he's so fast. It's actually ridiculous. The speed at which this guy can cover distance defies physics. A man this big shouldn't be able to cover distance that quickly. And on top of that, this guy is ridiculously accurate. You think a lot about heavyweights, right? A lot of them are big and slow and sluggish. But Derek Lewis is one of these guys that just explodes to life. And when he actually does blitz his opponents and attack them, he's very, very fast and very, very accurate. So, that strength of Derek Lewis to cover distance very, very quickly and attack his opponents is why I think he's a very live underdog here. Chael Sonnen absolutely nailed the breakdown for this fight. Please go over to Chael Sonnen and watch his prediction for Cyril Gane versus Derek Lewis. He does a much better job of explaining this than I could. When I researched this fight, Cyril Gane's boxing defense was shockingly bad. Very, very bad. To the point where, in his last fight, every time Volkov threw a punch, he pretty much landed. Gane is one of these guys that is just a little bit slow to react and doesn't do the best job of reading his opponent's power punches. Now, I know Chael takes a lot of shit for his breakdowns. I know that, Chael's predictions are a little bit of a meme. But I think that the breakdown video that Chael did for this fight is the best one Chael's ever done. He absolutely nailed it. He described Cyril Gane's striking defense perfectly and described the exact reason why Cyril Gane will be at significant risk of being knocked out here. If you go back and watch any of Cyril Gane's last fights, any of Cyril Gane's past fights, and the Volkov one is the best one to watch because it was the most competitive, what you'll see is when someone comes forward and goes to attack Gane, he kind of just does this. He just kind of puts his hands up like this, closes his eyes, and just backs up and circles away. Doesn't move his head. He just relies on you not being able to land anything while he circles away. The problem with doing this is that you're susceptible to the big wide hooks of Lewis. How many times we've seen him kill someone with an uppercut down the middle to split this guard. Could be susceptible to flying knees, head kicks. Cyril Gane does this against everyone. He just shells up and just hopes that you don't land anything crazy. But we know Derek Lewis is very accurate, very good at splitting the guard, and carries major, major, major power in his hands. Chael Sonnen described this as a shield, but Derek Lewis has got the weapons to penetrate that shield. Another thing you'll see Cyril Gane do a lot is duck his head down like this, and I don't know why he does it. Basically, Cyril Gane is a guy that likes to control the distance, right? He likes to keep you on the outside, take control of the center of the octagon, and pepper you with leg kicks and body kicks. When you blitz forward, he reacts in one of two ways. If he sees you coming, he will go to the shield and he'll back up like this and just hope that you don't land anything big as he's moving backwards. If you get to him before he's read that you're coming forward, instead he'll kind of duck his head down and look for the clinch. The problem with Cyril Gane when he does that is that he's wide open to the uppercut, like big time. He's very awkward, very clunky in that range. So Cyril Gane is excellent when he is allowed to control the distance. He is very good at being the hammer, but when the tables turn and he's got to be the nail and he's not allowed to fight in the distance he's most comfortable in, he starts to get very hittable and his defense doesn't look good. Now, what's interesting about this fight is obviously Gane is going to be able to rack up major volume on Lewis. And again, we've talked about Lewis's susceptibility to body kicks and leg kicks. However, this is really going to come down to how much Gane respects Derek Lewis's power, right? We know that Lewis is probably going to get less effective as the fight goes on. Lewis has improved his cardio a lot, but he does slow down. Is Lewis going to be able to deal with the volume of Gane? Is he going to be able to deter Gane from, peppering with volume strikes by using, the Tyron Woodley method we described of blitzing forward, getting your opponent to feel your power and deter them from attacking you? Is Lewis going to be able to utilize that strategy? Or, is Gane just going to, survive the blitzes and out-volume Lewis by a wide margin? I don't know. What I do know is Gann's boxing defense isn't great, and now he's going up against literally one of the scariest power punchers in the division, who can cover distance crazy fast and deliver fight-ending power, with ruthless accuracy. So, like I say, I do think it's more likely Gann wins because he can outwork Lewis by a really high volume. He could take Lewis down and kind of wear him out. He can wear him out in the clinch. Gann has a lot more weapons. He's the more technical, more skilled martial artist. However, Gann is there to be hit. Striking defense, sketchy. And Lewis is going to test that chin. And up until this point in Gann's career, haven't really seen Gann's chin tested. So for me, Lewis at big underdog odds gives us a really good risk to reward ratio. It's not a safe bet at all. Very risky and probably will lose. But again, if you consistently put your money in strong positions over a long period of time, you will make cash. And one of the ways that you can do that is just by only taking bets that have a good risk to reward ratio. This one absolutely does. So I hope you found that useful. Again, thanks for all your support this week. I fucking love you to death if you've been watching this far. Thank you so much. I'll be back as soon as I can. And enjoy the break we've got coming up. Fingers crossed we can go out on a win. Thank you for watching, everyone. Love you so much, boys. Have a great couple of weeks. I'll be back soon. Take care, guys. Bye.